Alright, so my mic is live. Hi everybody, welcome to the AV Geeks lunchtime streaming show where we watch old 16mm films until our computer crashes miserably. Wow. I guess, so the moral of this story is reboot your computer at least once a week. It's probably been a long time since I've rebooted this computer, and all I'm doing on this computer is streaming. I'm not doing anything else because this computer's old, and everything else that I use that has bigger processor speed, newer operating system, I'm using to do other things like digitizing film, or like for behind me I have a film scanner and there's a computer hooked up to that that's a newer version of the Mac. But holy cow, that crashed super hard. Super hard. So I apologize for that. That we were watching home movies from the South Seas and Japan. And what year was this? I don't know if I have a year. I feel like it was... Maybe it was just before World War II, so maybe late 30s. And this is, of course, to get to Japan and the South Seas, you took a ship. You cruised there, and it took a long time. Anyhow, I'm showing films about Japan today, and including some I've shown before. And you'll see why. Enjoy.
Japan today is a nation of contrast in traditional and modern patterns of life. This man's home and garden, for example, reflect the traditional world of old Japan. Here he enjoys the culture and customs of Japan's past. But he is also a citizen of modern Japan, which has adopted much of Western dress, as well as many of the patterns and conveniences of Western culture. Our businessman's city, Tokyo, is a commercial and industrial one, whose downtown streets indicate how modern Japan has become. Japan itself is an archipelago of 4 main islands and many smaller islands. It is separated by water from the mainland of Asia. Tokyo, Japan's modern capital, is the cultural and governmental center where the two worlds of modern Japan and traditional Japan exist side by side. Shintoism is the traditional religion of Japan. This Shinto shrine was built in the late 19th century by the Emperor Meiji, under whose reign Japan became a modern nation. Today, the present emperor spends much of his time at the Imperial Palace, one of the most popular tourist attractions of the capital. Situated opposite and high above this moat, the emperor's palace is a symbol of Japan's imperial tradition. This tradition, it is believed, extends back to the earliest period of Japanese history, when culture and civilization were very simple. From such a rude hut as this, the first Japanese emperor is said to have begun to rule in 660 BC. But there were probably no strong rulers until about 250 AD. These first emperors ruled a people whose homes were simple and whose lives were sustained by wet rice agriculture. During this period of early cultural development, the Japanese believed that powerful and unusual elements of nature, including certain mountains, trees, rocks, waters, and men, contained godlike spirits. Some of these spirits, called kami, were stronger than others. For instance, a particularly strong spirit dwelt on the slopes of Mount Fuji. Certain spirits were later enshrined. During this period, kami worship, called Shinto, was developed. In time, large shrines were constructed by powerful clans or family groups. Chieftains of such clans were aided by Shinto priests who also became powerful. The religious power of the priests was useful in establishing one of the clan chiefs as hereditary emperor. The emperor headed a centralized government and a court of nobles. During the 5th and 6th centuries AD, the unified state accepted new cultural elements from China. Among these were writing and a new religion, Buddhism. The Buddhist monks from China and Korea proved to be good teachers. The Japanese quickly assimilated the techniques of Chinese arts and crafts. Calligraphy, or the art of writing, was soon adapted and modified to fit Japanese needs. The Japanese also utilized the distinctive Chinese style of architecture. This is one of several temples in Nara, which became the first capital city of Japan in 710 AD. In the next major period of Japanese history, the capital was moved to Heian, later called Kyoto. This is the old imperial palace, similar to the buildings where the emperor and his court lived amid pomp and splendor. The court at Kyoto produced a golden age of art and literature. But toward the end of this period, there was civil war. One reason for this may be pointed out as we watch a recreation of a 10th century imperial procession. Though the emperor was a highly respected figure who traveled in seclusion, surrounded by the pomp of his court, he now possessed little actual political power. Much greater power was concentrated in the hands of the clans and their chieftains, or nobles, who fought among themselves to gain control of the emperor. The struggles among the nobles finally led to the establishment of a military dictatorship. The military dictator, or shogun, became the real power behind the throne. During the next period of Japanese history, under the absolute rule of the shoguns, trade with other Asiatic nations was increased. Such peaceful trade was interrupted toward the close of the 13th century, when the Mongol Emperor Kublai Khan sent a war fleet to invade Japan. The invasion was repulsed, partly because of the effect of a destructive typhoon, which the Japanese thought was the work of the gods of the wind, kamikaze. 3 centuries later, winds brought ships from other nations. In the late 16th century, ships from Portugal were the first to bring the products of Western science and technology to Japan. Guns were in especial demand by the Japanese ruling classes. The introduction of firearms caused a revolution in warfare, reflected in a change of architecture. Heavily fortified stone castles were built. Christianity was another influence introduced to Japan during the late 16th century. The later persecution of Christians opened the next period of Japanese history, a time of great unrest. In this period, the shogun moved his headquarters to the city of Edo, later called Tokyo. During this Edo period, the shoguns enforced the isolation of Japan. Western missionaries were expelled. The Japanese people were forbidden to leave the country. But the riches of Japanese trade could not be ignored by the West. In 1853, an American, Commodore Matthew Perry, arrived in Japan with a squadron of warships. Perry had come to persuade the shogun to open Japan again to the world. In the face of such a display of naval power, the shogun agreed. In 1854, a trade treaty between Japan and the United States was signed. With 200 years of isolation ended, Japan now entered its period of modern history. Japanese who had been cut off from the world saw in Western machines possibilities for an era of thriving industrialization for their country. In the late 19th century, the great Emperor Meiji strengthened imperial tradition, ended shogun rule and isolation, and began the amazing modernization of Japan. Great changes in traditional Japanese life were brought about in a single generation. Japan became steadily more industrialized in the closing years of the 19th century. Western educational methods were adopted, and many young men, upon graduation, traveled abroad to attend Western colleges, while many others joined the increasing ranks of Japan's armed forces. Western military techniques were used in building a model Japanese army and navy. The Sino-Japanese War of 1894 showed a surprised world how much Japan had learned from the West. The Japanese quickly defeated the Chinese army and navy and occupied many important Chinese bases. In achieving this victory, Japanese control extended into areas recently claimed by Russia in Northeast Asia. A clash with Russia was inevitable. In 1904, Japan challenged the Russian Empire. The Russians were decisively beaten at sea. Also on land, the Japanese military was victorious. In 1910, Japan annexed Korea. In 1919, following World War I, Japan received the mandate over former German islands in the Pacific area. Many Japanese were proud of their nation's territorial expansion. In 1932 and again in 1936, military factions took control of the government, and Japan seemed committed to a continued policy of expansion. Propaganda prepared by the fanatical military group began to shape Japanese public opinion. A fierce patriotism and national pride based on the imperial tradition led the Japanese to accept readily what they were told. They were told that large, costly armed forces equal to those of the West were necessary. They were told in the early 1930s that Japan must go to war to secure new markets. They were told that China's actions made it necessary for Japan to control Manchuria and the rest of China. Why not believe these things? Japan's armed forces were winning one victory after another in Manchuria and China. Japan was unopposed. Western nations, unwilling or unable to intercede, stood by as Manchuria and China crumbled. In Europe in 1939, with the start of World War II, Britain and France were mobilizing to battle Germany. On the other side of the world, Japan saw an opportunity to extend her control and influence in Asia. To prevent interference from the United States and her Pacific Fleet, on December 7th, 1941, Japanese planes severely crippled the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Quick initial successes against American forces at other points in the Pacific seemed to assure final victory for the Japanese. But the dreams of victory were to fade. Within 4 years, defeats replaced the early victories. The end came with stunning swiftness in 1945. Officials representing a defeated nation met with American leaders and signed a treaty of surrender. The war was over. The Japanese people witnessed the occupation of their homeland. Loyalty to the imperial tradition was still unshaken, and when their emperor himself required complete acceptance of the American democratic reforms, the people obeyed. Reconstruction of the war-damaged nation was carried out, and democratic reforms and changes made in government. Today, Japan is once more moving ahead. Traditional ways are gradually disappearing. But in building their future, Japanese still blend the old with the new, binding the traditional and the modern, the two strikingly different themes of the history of Japan.
Yeah. Our good friend at Cornet. I wish I knew that guy's name, the narrator, because he shows up a lot. And in digitizing a bunch of the Cornet films, we haven't run across that. So, at some point, show the vending machines. Yes, Kevin, I'm reading the comments. I watched this, a couple of shows on YouTube shows. One is called Dancing Bacons, and it's basically this couple from Singapore that go to Japan, and they just check out vending machines, and also other types of food all throughout Asia. But my secret wish here, I'm putting it out there in the world because that's what you do, is that at some point I will be invited to Japan. They'll pay for me to go there, and I will show films about America and American culture. That is my goal in life, bucket list type of thing. And if I do, I'm going to watch this next film to kind of show me what the experience is going to be like. This is Japanese Holiday. Enjoy.
Mount Fuji, the eternal symbol of Japan, in its ever-changing yet changeless aspects, the lure for tourists from 5 continents.
Can you tell me where the office of rent-a-car
An
is?
exciting arrival, and the quick and efficient arrangements for hiring a car.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
How many days are going to... Well,
How many days? Well, I think we should be here for about a week.
about a week.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
We are off and away for our tour of Japan's Kanagawa, Yamanashi, and Shizuoka prefectures, with Mount Fuji as the centerpiece, one of the most scenic parts of Japan. Arriving in Hakone, at one of the oldest and most famous Western hotels in Japan, set in beautiful mountain surroundings. relaxing Japanese style on the tatami. And now a great experience. Dinner Japanese style. Raw fish, shrimps and sake. Japanese rice wine. And oh, how clever we are with chopsticks. Now a trip on Lake Ashi, not far from our hotel. And at the end of the lake, the majestic cryptomerias that line the old historic highway from Tokyo to Kyoto. A look at wood, which will ultimately become a beautiful piece of Japanese craftsmanship. Owakudani, or Big Hell, a huge bubbling natural hot spring, from where we had spectacular views of Mount Fuji. Then we called at the Fuji Visitor Center and saw displayed the long history of the area and how Mount Fuji was created. The gorgeous woodland of the area of the 5 lakes around Mount Fuji. Lake Kawaguchi with the ever-present mountain. Now we zoom along the Izu Peninsula Skyline Drive and see yet more evidence of the volcanic hot spring nature of the region. Atami, the Atlantic city of Japan. Relaxation in our hotel room. We certainly had that holiday mood. Cape Irozaki, with the Pacific Ocean beyond, a tourist attraction all year round. A quick visit to historic Shimoda followed. Shimoda, at the foot of the Izu Peninsula, is where America's first consul to Japan, Townsend Harris, established his headquarters. Ryosenji Temple, Harris's temporary residence. By chance, we came upon a fisherman repairing his net. Next, quite a surprise for us, wild monkeys on the seashore. A quick drive along the Fuji-Subaru line to the 5th station of Mount Fuji. They say that if you climb Mount Fuji, Japan's highest mountain, you can see the most spectacular sunrise you will ever see. We had to do it. With the tools of the trade, we set off on the long climb. Climbing to the gods. The top still seems a long way off. We weren't the only ones who wanted to get above it all, but there's plenty of room and the open sky. At last, the topmost top. It was certainly worth the climb. Did you ever ski down a mountain with no snow? What a vacation. For two young people together, an experience of a lifetime. As we fly away, the mountain rests in all its splendor, quiet, majestic, the guardian of the spirit of Japan.
That was a Japan Airlines promotional film trying to convince people who are American or British to come to Japan. I think it was very telling at the very beginning when the tourists ask a traffic cop where to rent a car, and the traffic cop points them to the right direction. Kind of dealing with the anxiety of going to a land where nobody speaks English and saying like, oh no, some people speak English. It's great. Let's see. All right, so now behind me I have film scanner. Where am I? Behind me. And the reason that I showed all these films about Japan is because this film, which is a religious film, it's probably a missionary film, is about Japan, I think. So in the credits it says stuff about Japan, and I'm like, all right, okay, I think this is a Japanese film, and so I'm going to build an entire show around it. Now, what will be hilarious is if it has nothing to do with Japan. And that's kind of the deal, right? We plan some stuff here at AV Geeks, and some stuff it's by the seat of our pants, especially if our computer crashes. So I appreciate that you are okay with that. And maybe you aren't okay with that. Maybe you're like, Skip, come on, get it together. You've been doing this for more than 30 years. You should have your act together a little bit more. But I should say, tomorrow I am planning something. Tomorrow is actually International Silent Movie Day. So I will pull a silent movie and we'll watch it. I'm going to see if I have a feature that I can pull and show. We'll see. We'll see what I got. But it will be all silent films tomorrow in honor of that. And then if you are close to an Alamo Draft House, they are showing The Unknown, which is whacked out Todd Browning, the guy who did Freaks, who did Dracula, and some other, and the Unholy Three. It's a whacked out film that's silent, and they're showing that this weekend, I think. So if you're around, go see it. All right, anyhow, here we go. We're going to go to the film scanner and we're going to watch Kenji Comes Home. Enjoy.
August 5th, 1947, exactly 2 years after an atomic bomb destroyed Hiroshima, a trainload of returning soldiers arrived in a Japanese railroad station. Two years after the war, and they were still coming back. From faraway outposts on Pacific Islands, from prison camps, from hospitals. The conquered men, the disillusioned and the weary men, the men who would have to build a new Japan. Another train, another shipment of hopeful soldiers who searched for familiar faces. Another formal speech of welcome from another mayor to heroes who were no longer heroic. This was the homecoming of Kenji Morikawa. There were no relatives to greet him. There were no friends. Only the faces of strangers occupied with their own problems, their own sorrows or joys. Even the city that he had known so well was a stranger. A place where familiar streets had disappeared as though by magic.
Ah! Ah! All right. So, yeah, the film was warped and it popped right off over here. You can't see it because it's dark, and if I move that webcam, it will go down. All right. It's one of those days. One of those days. Let's learn about parts of speech, which has absolutely nothing to do with Japan, but I'll see if I can fix this and get it running before too late. All right, enjoy.
Here we are at a bathing beach on a warm summer day. We could make up any number of sentences about the things we see. Oh, and she and her friends are playing with it on the beach. Here is the sentence you just heard. Sue has a gaily striped ball, and she and her friends are playing with it on the beach. To help us see the different jobs the words in the sentence do, let's take a picture of the game. Here is the picture. And here are the words we used to describe it. Some of the words name things. Sue, ball, friends, beach. Another word for naming Sue is she. And another word for naming the ball is it. Some of the words modify other words, giving us more information about them. These are modifiers. A gaily striped ball. Her friends. The beach. Other words connect words. And she and her friends. With it. On the beach. And the remaining words has and are playing tell about actions. Of course, there are many things we could say about this beach scene using many different words. Even though there are hundreds of thousands of words in our language, there are only 8 different jobs they do. These 8 jobs are done by what we call the parts of speech. The 8 parts of speech are nouns, pronouns, and adjectives, verbs and adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. Knowing the jobs the parts of speech do is important in learning to express yourself clearly. We're going to see what each of those jobs is. Keep an eye on this dark strip at the bottom of the picture. Words will appear here to help you learn about the parts of speech. Here we are at the beach again. We can use words that name things to help us tell what we see. Words that name something are called nouns. Here are some nouns. Beach, friends, boys, girls, ball. These words name things. So does the word Sue. That's the name of a person. The words David and Fred each name a person, too. A noun is the part of speech that names a person, place, or thing. So in our sentence, these words that name things are the nouns. Now, instead of using nouns, such as boys, girls, or friends, we could simply say they, or them. Words that take the place of nouns are called pronouns. We are using pronouns when we refer to Sue as she or her. Instead of the word ball, we can use the pronoun it. Pronouns such as they, them, she, her, and it are useful to help us avoid repeating nouns. Now we can show the pronouns in our sentence. Now, with nouns and pronouns, we can name the things we see here. But sometimes we want to either modify or describe what we name. Words that do this are called adjectives. Let's use some adjectives. Mike and Timmy can each be called a boy, but Mike is a big boy, and Timmy is a little boy. The words big and little are adjectives. They help describe the noun boy. Each of these can be called a towel, but adjectives can show us how they are different. This is a striped towel. This is a white towel. And this is a gay towel. The word gay, like white and striped, is used as an adjective. We might say this ball or that ball. The words this and that are used as adjectives. Adjectives help describe or modify a noun or pronoun. The words the, a, and an, because they modify nouns, are also adjectives, although they are sometimes called articles. Now we can show the adjectives in our sentence. We can name and describe what we see using nouns, pronouns, and adjectives. But what is happening on the beach? Verbs help us express what is happening. What are these boys doing? The boys are building. The words are building are being used as a verb. Let's ask the question in another way. What do the boys build? They build a castle. Build tells what they do. Build is a verb in this sentence. What is happening to the castle? The castle is being built. The words is being built are being used as a verb. Verbs show action. In a sentence, they show what nouns or pronouns are doing or what is being done to them. But a verb can also show the state of being of a noun or pronoun. In observing the water, Tom thinks, the water is clear. The word is being used as a verb. It expresses a state or condition of being of the water. The water is. That is its state of being. The adjective clear tells what the water is. It seems cool. The word seems is also being used as a verb, expressing the state of being of the water. The adjective cool tells what the water seems. It feels refreshing. Feels is also a state of being verb. The adjective refreshing tells how the water feels. So you see, verbs can show either action or state of being. Now let's show the verbs in our sentence. We modify verbs with a part of speech called adverbs. We can use adverbs to help us describe the action of swimming in the race between Eddie and John. Eddie is swimming, and John is swimming. But John is swimming rapidly. Rapidly is being used as an adverb. How is John doing? He is winning now. Now is an adverb. Both are racing here. Here is an adverb. Each of the adverbs in these sentences does a slightly different job for the verb it modifies. John is swimming rapidly. Rapidly tells how John is swimming. He is winning now. Now tells when he is winning. Both are racing here. Here tells where both are racing. We've seen adverbs modifying verbs, but adverbs may also modify adjectives and other adverbs. For example, take this sentence. The sand is painfully hot. Painfully modifies the adjective hot. Painfully is being used as an adverb. Ellen is running unusually fast. Unusually modifies the adverb fast. So unusually is an adverb because of the job it does. Now let's go back to our original sentence and show the adverb in it. Remember, we said that Sue has a gaily striped ball. Gaily is an adverb because it modifies the adjective striped. But to tell what is about to happen in this scene, we'll need another kind of word, a word that belongs to the part of speech called prepositions. Prepositions join nouns and pronouns to other words in a sentence. Let's write a sentence describing this scene. We'll use a noun, Timmy, a verb, is sitting, and another noun, Roger. Of course, we haven't fully expressed what is happening. To show the relationship between the noun Roger and the verb is sitting, we need the preposition on. Timmy is sitting on Roger. Roger thinks a friend of his should be more kind. Well, in this sentence, the word of is being used as a preposition. It shows a relationship between the pronoun his and the noun friend. Let's show the prepositions in this sentence. Words that connect other words in a different way are called conjunctions. Conjunctions help us simplify what we say. For example, we could say, Roger is going swimming. His friends are going swimming too. But it would be simpler to say, Roger and his friends are going swimming. The word and is used to join the nouns Roger and friends. Roger won't go in. The water is too cold. These two sentences might have more meaning if we said, Roger won't go in because the water is too cold. The word because is used to join the two ideas. Roger will either go in or be forced in. The conjunctions either and or join the words go in to the words be forced in. Conjunctions are used to link words, phrases, or sentences. The two ands in our first sentence are conjunctions. Now our sentence is complete and uses 7 parts of speech. But there is one more part of speech we haven't used. Let's take another look at Roger and his friends and see the use of interjections that help us express feelings. Wow, the water is cold. Wow is an interjection. It expresses strong feeling. Well, it's not too bad. Well is an interjection that shows mild feeling and is used to introduce the sentence. Let's see if Fred can supply another interjection. Ouch! So in sentences about the beach, we have seen the work done by the parts of speech. Remember, there are 8 parts of speech. You will need to understand all the parts of speech to communicate ideas clearly and accurately by means of language.
All right. I got the film up. So this is the question. It's probably 20 minutes. No, it's probably closer to 30 minutes. Did you want me to show the rest of Kenji Comes Home? Or did you want me to save it for maybe next week? Vote in the comments. What you want to see. In the meantime, I just want to say thank you for bearing with me and all the technical problems. It was, it's been one of those days. Okay, so one person next week, somebody says show it. Some people concerned about Kenji's well-being. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and show it. And then some of you can take off, that's fine. But, you know, hit the like button, the super thanks button. Tomorrow, again, is going to be silent films in honor of Silent Movie Day. And, all right. Yeah. All right. So here we go. Here is Kenji Comes Home, already in progress. Enjoy.
Even the city that he had known so well was a stranger. A place where familiar streets had disappeared as though by magic, leaving only ruins behind, impersonal and bleak. It was impossible for him to believe that a house had once stood here. A house where people had gotten up in the morning and gone to work, had eaten meals and gone to bed at night. Impossible to believe that this had been his house, his family, that this was all that was left of home. This little tea kettle, how well he remembered it. It seemed only yesterday that it was singing merrily on a stove, while his mother prepared tea for the family. Every night, just before bedtime, they used to play a game of Go. Grandfather always won, because they let him win. Kenji would never forget that last night at home, the night before he left for the army. It was a solemn moment as they all knelt before the family shrine and prayed that the gods would find Kenji worthy of sacrifice to the Sun Emperor. Yes, they prayed, but his mother cried. Was it yesterday or 100 years ago that this book had lain on the little shelf in his bedroom? And the snapshot. Where were those schoolboy comrades now? School days had been good days. Days of faith, of security, and sureness. The teacher was a superior whose authority could not be questioned. He was treated with deference and humility. You listened, you obeyed, and you believed. Japan must expand to survive. The Sun Emperor has said it. The Sun Emperor is divine. Our destiny is to rule the world. We will conquer. We will conquer. The Emperor has said it. The Emperor is divine. War, destiny, conquest. Yes, yes, yes. The friends of the snapshot are gone now, along with the fanatical belief in the holiness of war, the underlying faith in the gods themselves. For the gods of Shinto had betrayed Kenji and all the people of Japan. The old gods had somehow lost face, and there were no new ones to replace them. There was not even faith in a future in this world of ruins, of inflation and unemployment, this world of thieves and black marketeers, of beggars and war orphans. The boy's name was Shiro, and he was like a lonely puppy who had found a friend. Kenji had found a friend too, a friend who was hungry. And the next day he started looking for work. But finding a job wasn't easy. Unemployment was widespread. If a man heard of a job, he told a friend about it. And Kenji was a stranger in the city he had once called home. And then Shiro told Kenji about a factory which had just reopened last week. But it was always the same story. Most of the factories that had not been destroyed in the war were still shut down, and the ones that were open again had all the help they needed. The days of searching were long and weary, and what little money Kenji had was almost gone now. He became so hopeless that even Shiro's boyish encouragement had little effect on him. And then, as he looked again at the old snapshot, he remembered Tomio, his friend Tomio, who had written down his address here on the picture so many years ago. Tomio would know what to do. Tomio would help him. The address wasn't far away, just on the other side of town. The young woman who opened the door was Aki, Tomio's sister. Kenji was overjoyed to see her and ask for Tomio. But Tomio was dead, killed in the war. Aki spoke gently and quietly. It had happened early in the war, somewhere in the Pacific. But there were so many who had died. Kenji could hardly speak. He could only say he was sorry and leave. As Aki and her mother watched him go, they sensed something of his loneliness and despair. They decided to ask him to visit them and to bring Shiro too. How about next Sunday afternoon? Kenji was touched by their friendliness and gratefully accepted. With renewed courage, Kenji continued his search for work, and at last he found a job in a small machine shop. A job for Kenji meant lonely days for Shiro, but there would be money for food now, and a rented room that they could call home. It was good to be at work again, to feel useful and wanted, to do something that wasn't aimed to destroy other human beings. And it was good to find new friends, men who gave him a helping hand or a word of advice. For the first time since his return, Kenji began to believe that there was such a thing as a future. But the future, for Kenji and for all the people of Japan, brought problems. The problems of a new way of life called democracy. Today, for example, the workers in the shop were meeting to form a labor union. An American Army officer was on hand, and the men wondered what he would order them to do. The Americans were their masters now, and they were ready to serve them. But the officer gave no orders. He said he was here to help themselves. A labor union was a democratic institution in which free people could join together and protect their rights as workers. They could do their own organizing, elect their own leaders. It was their union. Kenji listened. He was pleased, but he was puzzled, and so were the others. This was something new. They were used to leaders who issued orders, while they had only to obey. If they were not told what to do, how would they know how to act? This democracy seemed good, but it was very confusing. Meanwhile, Shiro had decided that if Kenji could work, so could he. He could be a businessman too. had forgotten that among the boys of the streets there was only one law, the law of the jungle. As Kenji came home from work that night, he felt happier than he'd been in years. He had a job, friends, neighbors, a home, and Shiro. Shiro had been beaten and robbed of his earnings in the broad light of day. This could never have happened in the old Japan, Kenji was thinking. But the old Japan was gone. And this new Japan, disorderly, chaotic, was this democracy? At work the next day, Kenji was silent and worried. What kind of country had he returned to? What kind of future was in the making? One thing sure, he wasn't going to let Shiro turn into one of these lawless boys of the street. To begin with, the boy was going to have new clothes. At least he wouldn't look like a street urchin. On the following Sunday, Kenji and Shiro went to visit Aki and her mother. It had been a long time since Kenji had known the warm feeling of being welcome in a friend's home. And there was something about these friends, a kindliness and a tranquility that made their home a happy place to be. They were strangely different from the women of old Japan, just as polite, but freer to be themselves. They were really interested in Kenji. And they were concerned about Shiro, too. What had happened? How had he hurt his hand? Kenji told them how Shiro had tried to be a shoeshine boy, how he wished that Shiro might go to a good school and receive the kind of care he needed. Aki knew of a school that would be just the place for Shiro. It was a Christian school. Yes, Aki and her mother were Christians. Even Shiro had noticed the picture on the wall. Shiro's first day at the new school was a happy occasion for everybody but Shiro. He was full of doubts. Who were these strangers? What were they going to do to him? He felt better when he saw Aki. And when he got into a baseball game, he felt still better. Even during the war, baseball had continued to be Japan's favorite sport. And Shiro felt thoroughly at home with a bat in his hands. Kenji went back to work, happy and confident that Shiro would be cared for. He didn't quite understand why these people, these Christians, should be so kind to him, but he asked no questions. There were other questions to occupy Kenji now. This union, for example. Good man and well liked, but he was no leader. He didn't tell them what to do. He asked them for suggestions and ideas, but they didn't seem to have any, except for one man and a couple of his friends. This man had ideas, big ones, ideas that he believed in, ideas he was willing to fight and die for, ideas that he wanted to spread far and wide in this war-torn, troubled country, ideas that could take easy root with a people who had long been used to a strong voice of authority. And when that voice promised more jobs, more houses, more money, Kenji, along with the rest of them, listened. They listened, and they liked what they heard. Here at last was a leader. And when the chairman called for a vote, the voice of authority won its first battle in the fight against the freedom of the individual. Kenji was impressed. This man, his friend and comrade, had spoken forcefully. He seemed to know the problems that faced this new Japan, to see the need for order and reform and action, positive action. And then Kenji fell in love. He couldn't have said just when it happened or exactly why. It wasn't just that Aki was beautiful and intelligent. He'd met beautiful girls before, intelligent ones too. It was something else about her, a quality that seemed to radiate out toward people, toward the world itself, a kindliness, a warmth. She had a sort of dignity too, a quiet sureness about her own value as a person. And yet he had never known her to be conceited or proud. She was interested in everything, and so was he. And so naturally they never seemed to get through talking. One afternoon, instead of walking in the park, they went to the university where Aki was studying. At first, Kenji felt ill at ease. His own education had been cut short to the war, and he'd been taught that teachers were superior beings who must be deferred to. But these professors were different. They were human beings. They didn't talk down to their students. They talked with them as equals. They were friends as well as instructors. The science lab made Kenji thoughtful. Science could discover penicillin or make an atom bomb, save lives or take them. It all depended on people. If all people were like Aki and her mother, if all people were kind and generous, perhaps there would be no wars. Maybe that sort of kindness could only exist where people were free, to think for themselves without fear, without orders from above, free to disagree and argue and compromise. In the library, it was the same thing. No books were banned, no forbidden political or religious philosophies. Here, in a Christian college, there were books on Buddhism, Judaism, or Mohammedanism, books on communism, democracy, or socialism. Here a man could read anything he wished and come to his own decisions. Here was the book about Christianity, the Bible, the basis for Aki's faith. Kenji was curious. What was in this book that was so important? On the following Sunday, Kenji and Aki went visiting again, this time to the home of Aki's friend, the Protestant minister. Kenji had started reading the Bible. It interested him, but he had lots of questions. And so Aki had suggested that he go talk with the minister himself. The idea of questioning a religious man about his faith seemed very rude to him. and at first he felt embarrassed. But the minister's friendliness and informality soon put him at ease. The minister talked simply and quietly without trying to force anyone to accept this faith of his, and Kenji relaxed and listened thoughtfully. At union meetings, Kenji listened too. Here he learned about another kind of religion, whose god was a state. This idea was equally puzzling to him, and he wanted to learn more about it. His friend had answers to his questions, answers delivered with a voice of authority. A man must give himself to the state. This was the only road to economic security and happiness. One day, Kenji and Aki attended a discussion group at Aki's church. The subject for debate was communism versus democracy and their relation to Christianity. Kenji was excited and interested. Now at last, he was going to watch these two opposing beliefs fight it out in an open discussion. Maybe now he would be able to clear up his own questions and decide what he believed in. Because Kenji had reached a point now where he felt he had to make a choice. He had to believe in something. The debate raged back and forth. Kenji grew so excited that he wanted to talk himself. But he was awkward and shy, and words failed him. Meanwhile, Kenji's friend at the shop gave him some reading to do too. Kenji's mind was hungry for ideas these days, and he took the pamphlets eagerly, hoping that here he would find an answer. The communists had an answer, one that was as clearly stated at labor rallies as it was in their pamphlets. Their arguments were persuasive. The capitalists had used democracy as a means to their own ends. They had robbed the workers, and the workers had only one recourse: to seize power themselves, by trickery, by lies, by bloodshed. It didn't matter how. To a man in Kenji's shoes, these arguments were appealing ones. They promised him economic security such as he had never known. All he had to do was believe and obey. Let the state be his protector, his benefactor, and his God. Promises, security, food, jobs, houses, health, and happiness. Yours, Kenji. Join us, comrade. Fight. Fight. That night, Kenji could not sleep. The words of the speakers at the rally echoed in his mind like the beat of drums in martial music. Food, jobs, houses, fight, join us, fight. These were words that he had heard before, promises that had been made before. Other leaders, other rallies before the war. The same faith in violence, the same hysteria sweeping the crowd, the same waving banners, the same cheers. Here were the books that promised things. Jobs, houses, health. These were important. But was happiness only a matter of comfort and well-being? The Bible said there was something more, and Kenji wondered. The next day was Sunday, and Kenji and Aki went to church. To Kenji, this seemed to be a meeting too. It was not a very large one, and the speaker talked quietly, without frenzy. And yet there was an atmosphere here that Kenji liked. He felt at peace with himself and with the world. Perhaps this man had an answer too. He suggested that love, not violence, might reshape man's world. That spirits as well as bodies might need food. That a state was made up of individual souls, each responsible to himself and to his God. And Kenji was thinking, I have no God, but perhaps I could find him if I tried. Kenji's friend at the shop became more powerful and finally took over leadership of the union. The democratic principles of good trade unionism, which the American officer had described, were lost sight of and forgotten. The union became a political organization. It told the men what to think and do, not only on the job, but after working hours too. Kenji objected. A man should be free to choose his own political beliefs. A union's purpose was to protect its members, not to dictate their politics. Yes, Kenji objected, and he got into trouble. To the communist leaders, Kenji had become a dangerous man, a man who dared to disagree. And communism, unlike democracy, has only one solution for a dissenter: liquidation, complete and absolute. If you're not for us, you're against us. A man's machine can be tampered with, so that he'll be fired for inefficiency on the job. A friend can betray you, because friendship doesn't matter. Honesty doesn't matter. Moral issues are unimportant, because the end justifies the means. Only the welfare of the state counts. And so now, Kenji was back where he started from, jobless and alone. But he was not quite alone. He still had Aki, and she was proud of his courageous action. Perhaps the university could help him. There might be a scholarship or some job for him there. But disappointment awaited them. There were no scholarships available and funds were low. Barely enough to keep the school going. But there was even worse news in store for Kenji. Aki was going away to a teacher's college in Tokyo. She had postponed telling him as long as she could, but the day of her departure was close now, and he would have to know. Kenji took the news fatalistically. He might have known that things would turn out this way. Aki tried to cheer him, but she felt sad herself. On the day of Aki's departure, Kenji and Shiro went to the station to say goodbye. It was a sad day for Kenji. Without Aki, he'd feel lost, and Aki too was worried. She smiled, but she wondered what would happen to him. As much as he might like the democratic way of life, would he have strength enough to fight for it? In his confusion, he would need guidance, and he would also need a job. She prayed that there was something the church could do, something that America could do, for Kenji and the millions of young men like him. Here, in this railroad station, is where Kenji's story began. But it doesn't end here. In his time of trouble, Kenji is turning to the church, where he has found friends and a beginning faith. What the church can do for Kenji depends on us. You and I will write the ending of Kenji's story together.
Epic. Thanks for sticking around. Of course, this is then when you saw this in church, and then someone from your church's missionary fund would come out and say that, when you tithe, some of your money goes towards missionaries And that's what this is. Not only are you saving souls, but you're also stemming the evil, godless communists who are slowly taking over war-torn countries. So, anyways, it was interesting when the American soldier, the military were like, unions are great. And I was like, because that rhetoric wasn't really going on in the United States. There was a lot of anti-labor stuff going on post-World War II. Anyhow, thank you so much for tuning in today in spite of all the technical problems. But, technical problems are what makes the AV Geeks work. That and your support, you watching our films, commenting, sharing, hitting the thumbs up button, the like button, donating via the super thanks thing in the chat, but even like watching other films that we have on our channel, that's bringing in money that's actually helping us pay for 4 storage units now. We're paying for 4 storage units, and I'm buying shelving for those units. This is to accommodate new films that are showing up, but also to get all the films that we have in the basement here at the archive out. The basement is a horrible place right now, and we are trying to fix that. But what that means is we have to move everything out. So it's a lot of work. But we continue to show stuff to you. I love showing stuff to folks like you. And so thanks again. We'll be back again tomorrow. And it's going to be silent films because it's Silent Movie Day. An international event. Thanks again for tuning in. And we will see you tomorrow. Take care.